I'd like to begin by offering my deepest condolences to the families of the 3 Americans who lost their lives on Sunday in Manda Bay, Kenya. An attack by Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Shabaab resulted in the death of a U.S. service member and 2 Department of Defense contractors, while wounding 2 other American personnel. On behalf of the entire department, our thoughts are with the family and friends of Army Specialist Henry Mayfield, Jr. He was in Kenya in support of Operation Octave Shield, working to protect American interests in the region and improve security and stability alongside our Kenyan partners. We honor him and his colleagues who lost their lives and assure you that the perpetrators of this attack will be brought to justice. The United States conducted over 60 airstrikes against Al-Shabaab's safe havens and assets last year, and our forces continue to provide training and counterterrorism support to our East African partners at the Manda Bay Airfield to help them in the fight. Moving to Iran. At this time, our top priorities remain: first, the safety and security of American personnel and our partners, and second, our readiness to conduct operations to respond to Iranian aggression. Since the strike, I've spoken with the commanders on the ground to ensure they have the resources they need to protect their people and prepare for any contingencies. As a result, we've increased our force protection postures across the region and will continue to reposition and bolster our forces as necessary to protect our people, our interests, and our facilities. As I mentioned to you yesterday, we have received widespread support for our actions from our allies and partners in the region, and we will continue to work with them to protect our gains against ISIS. I've been in constant communication with my counterparts and have called on them to stand with us in the defense of coalition forces in Iraq. Working through NATO to defeat ISIS coalition and with our partners on the ground, we continue to bolster Iraqi institutions to ensure the lasting defeat of ISIS. As we defend our people and interests, let me reiterate that the United States is not seeking a war with Iran, but we are prepared to finish one. We are seeking a diplomatic solution, but first, this will require Iran to de-escalate. It will require the regime to come to the table with the goal of preventing further bloodshed. And it will require them to cease their malign activities throughout the region. As I've said, we are open to having this discussion with them, but we are just as prepared to deliver a forceful response to defend our interests. Finally, the American people should know that their safety is in the hands of the strongest, most capable military in the world. The men and women of our armed forces should know that we are standing with them and will continue to support them as they meet and overcome today's threats from malign actors, including Iran and its proxy militias. Our partners should know that we remain committed to our strategic priorities in the Middle East: deterring Iranian bad behavior, sustaining the enduring defeat of ISIS, and supporting Iraq as it becomes a strong and independent nation. And the architects of terror should know that we will not tolerate attacks against America's people and interests, and will exercise our right to self-defense should that become necessary once again.
Just like Jeffrey Epstein.
That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down. And the whole crowd stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Then the disciples came and said to him, Why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered them, To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, You will indeed hear but never understand, and you will indeed see but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed. Lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, and did not see it, and hear what you hear, and did not hear it. How's it going, everybody? That was a verse selection from Matthew 13, chapter 13. Just sort of felt pertinent to what I'm trying to touch upon here, and do my best to share kind of what's on my heart and on my mind. Began putting this together a couple days ago when 3,500 paratroopers had just been deployed, and so of course I knew, like anytime you start trying to do a video on something like this, if it's not real short and quick, day by day things can progress and develop very quickly. And of course, today we just had this Ukrainian passenger plane airliner crash, and of course it's being blamed on Iran for shooting it down. So it's just getting all kinds of interesting and accelerated, and yet there, of course the rhetoric is that, we don't want war, but we're prepared for war. And man, I tried to kind of get myself caught up, because I honestly can't even listen to this kind of coverage for any extended period of time usually, because I just get so aggravated and angry just listening to the layers upon layers of BS. And the interesting thing, timing wise, I guess, is that a few weeks ago I got into a rather unexpected conversation with a member of my extended family. And they were trying to tell me about this documentary that they'd watched, and, wanted me to check it out, and they thought it was really cool. And I was like, yeah, what is it, what's it about? And it's this documentary called Sheep Among Wolves. In fact, this is like Sheep Among Wolves Part 2. Apparently Part 1 was like a few years ago, but Part 2 came out like 4 months ago. And it's all about this underground church movement in Iran, right? And how all these people are coming to Christ, and because it's such an intense environment, and they can risk going to jail or crazy persecution and all this stuff, that the church is very vibrant and spirit-led, and they don't have buildings or pastors or 501c3s. It's all just basically spirit-led, Book of Acts type discipleship level of faith, where you're willing to go to prison or forfeit your life even, or deal with, being rejected by your family and friends and all this stuff, which is like pretty exciting, right? And I was like, of course I'd be very interested in all those things, having been very, the idea of persecution and how the church operates underground and has to deal with hostile regimes and a hostile society to the Bible and the truth, obviously. But then also this person explained that because so many Iranians are coming to Christ, that they're totally changing their perspective on Israel, and they love Israel, and they're like a witness to the rest of Iran and a witness to the Jewish people, and that there's this whole like eschatological, dynamic to it all, having to do with Israel and the Jewish people. And it was like, oh. And long story short, I wound up getting into an unexpected, a conversation about Zionism, and really trying to just break down in the most basic biblical terms without getting into, all the intense scary conspiracy Illuminati type things, at least in any detail, but just going to the scriptures and the gospel, and what is the Abrahamic covenant, and what does the entire New Testament have to say about this whole idea of Israel, and who is Israel, and what is the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven? What did Jesus preach, and how does that apply today, and so on? And it went well. I mean, they were pretty receptive and listened, but yeah, we had a pretty good conversation. I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, but I hadn't even watched it yet. So it was just based on my reaction. So after yesterday, or after the 3,500 paratroopers are being deployed to Kuwait, to then go on to wherever, and obviously, who knows if it's going to progress this far in the next few days or whatever. But paratroopers are pretty much trained for one specific type of operation. Parachuting behind enemy lines, and so that is pretty serious. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to go watch this thing, and so I did on Wednesday, a couple of nights ago, this Sheep Among Wolves documentary, and if you could even really call it that. So it's mostly just these American dudes kind of giving their perceptions of everything, and because they're saying they're protecting the identities of the Iranian Christians, whatever. But then I'm watching, and I'm waiting for because aside from the part at the beginning, they barely talk about Israel, and then in the last 20 minutes they go back to that, and yeah, it was pretty much kind of what I expected with this I was just left struck by, how naive freaking American or Western, whatever, Western Christians are about so many aspects of stuff that's going on in the news. And on the one hand, I'm so beyond all this stuff to where it's like, what is the point? What is, I don't even care. It's all scripted. It's all manipulated. It's wag the dog to the nth degree. And yeah, I can barely stomach listening to 30 seconds of mainstream media talking about Iran, hosting all these proxy wars, proxy militias and everything. And the irony being that the United States, the UN, NATO, all this, these are the biggest proxy military groups in the world. America doesn't fight for what most Americans actually think America is fighting for. And how, to somebody who believes in Jesus and believes in the Bible and believes all the right things about the death and the resurrection, and we can have great conversations and fellowship in that, and then yet, of course, everybody watches, they still watch the news, they still believe all these narratives, and I probably have the hardest time out of anyone, talking to folks like that in my family or the circles that I was raised in, where it's almost easier to talk to some truther person on the internet who's all mixed up and all kinds of occult nonsense and everything. As difficult and challenging as that is, it's harder to talk to somebody that you've known your whole life, and how difficult it is for them to comprehend that, Zionism, first and foremost, they can't, because everyone's been indoctrinated to think that questioning Zionism or questioning the United States' role in the Middle East or around the world is that's some sort of hateful anti-Semitic thing. It's like, no more than your entire New Testament is anti-Semitic and hateful. And they're like, what? But yeah, all the little trigger things and all the topics they don't want to, they don't want to talk about 9/11. They don't want to talk about anything conspiratorial. It's like, but then the ironic thing, right? It's like when you're watching this documentary and then talking to this member of my family, it just struck me because in certain contexts, it's like these folks, they can totally grasp the idea that Iran, this Islamic Republic of Iran, is a satanically controlled regime that hates God, that can't be trusted, that is capable of lying, and basically Iran is now treated as like a, the war on terror narrative is still churning along, even though most people have just kind of become blasé about it, right? I'm just so sick of it, but it's still officially, strong as ever, and being applied to Iran, and just the same way that many of these other like bad actor countries, quote unquote, that's the axis of evil, all these nations that have been demonized systematically, and there's been a script, there's been an agenda that is decades, if not generations or hundreds of years old. Certainly on the human level, it goes back to at least the inception of the CIA and the Mossad, but obviously it's probably even older than that. But this whole fomentation of instability and instigation of conflict for a very specific purpose, for a very specific agenda, that most Christians in America just cannot even conceive of. They can talk about Iran or some of the, Al-Shabaab and ISIS, and they can understand, these are satanic and these people are hateful, but it's, trying to go to where trying to then get them to pivot and then go, what about your government? What about your homeland, your heritage, whatever, your citizenship, this alleged democracy that we all live in? Does Satan control that, And it's like, it just can't. They can't go there. They can't process. And so they don't want to look. But, and it's difficult to gently and patiently try and point these things out without just getting to the point where you're like, at some point you just gotta, there's no sugarcoating it. And it's not defeatist or nihilistic or something like that to, like, oh, you have no hope, and you think that Satan's won, to say that Satan actually controls all the governments of this world, all the human leaders in governments and industry and finance and entertainment and media and everything else. These are all Satan's mechanisms. They're all his puppets. They're all his because he built them. We built them, but he built them through us. We were building it all for him, for this planned externalization, of the satanic hierarchy for a one world system. And so, Iran has been on the drawing board for being dismantled and taken down and taken out of the way for a long, long time. So in some ways, all this stuff that's going on is not like even hardly any big news, but just brought it all home because, here we are close to 20 years after 9/11, and so much work and research has been done to show how that whole event was a complete farce, and everything that's come in the wake of it in terms of like terrorism and our involvement in the Middle East and all these bases, and it's all a complete farce. But the Emperor's parade marches on because people don't want to think something so horrific and so diabolically evil and deceptive could really be happening, especially in their own country that they believe so much in. And and ultimately that's why understanding what the kingdom of heaven really is all about is so important, because it doesn't matter whether you're talking about being an American citizen or a Canadian citizen and or Iranian, Iraqi, Russian, Kenyan, Palestinian, all these things. In the light of the gospel, this is all temporary things. This is not where a follower of Jesus has their citizenship. And so it was pretty cool, actually, listening to a lot of the testimonies of these Iranians, and all the things that they had endured, some of them enduring like terrible abuse and rape, or just, very, very difficult circumstances, and they're coming to Christ, and the pain and the hardship that they went through, that to where now they're just, they're just 100% devoted to living for God and for eternity, rather than, the temporal life that is here today and gone tomorrow and passing away. And that applies to your own personal life, and then that applies to the macro scale of investing yourself in patriotic identities or goals, or even worldwide futuristic goals for humanity as a whole. So I've just been really thinking about all that, like how on the one hand there's like this sense of inevitability. It's not like, oh no, we got to wake everybody up so that we don't go to war. Like, sooner or later, they're going to get their invasion of Iran. One way or another, you know, you're going to have Alsflay, Agflays, up the wazoo, just bringing, I mean, they already, like, assassinated a general. That should be an act of war, to assassinate top-ranking uniformed military personnel. And then their explanation is like, well, he was planning stuff. He was planning on attacking America, threatening America. So we had to take him out, like he was, some Al-Qaeda dude hiding in a cave. Apparently, by drone bombing this one general, whatever he was planning was just couldn't be carried out after he was dead. Right? It was all in his head or something. They won't even say what it was. I mean, it's all nonsense. But but these are real people. How many Iraqis alone have died because of these wars of occupation, these proxy wars that had nothing to do with protecting America, but trying to protect a different political and military entity and enterprise. We are the proxy militia. Have been for a long time. But, by the end of this documentary, they're getting into how, somehow these Iranian Christians, because they serve Jesus now, they love the Jewish people, and they love, because Jesus was a Jew, and all this, and it's, At the beginning of it, I think they even said, like, they're coming to believe in the Jewish Messiah, and I was trying to explain to this family member, like, well, it's funny how even a phrase like that, it depends on, what it was really meant by that statement. Because on one level, it's accurate. Yeah, because Jesus was Jewish 2,000 years ago, and everyone he's talking to, in Matthew 13, he's talking to Jewish listeners. And when he's talking about how they don't have ears to hear, and their hearts are dull. But then, this assumption that, like, the Jewish Messiah, the Jews are just still waiting for their Messiah, like, and as long as we just support this military political entity known as Israel, this 1948 established nation, then that's how they're going to come back to faith, because God's going to win them over through some sort of military intervention, or I don't know. I still can't really figure out the nitty-gritty of how this dispensationalist Christian Zionism eschatology really understands all that to work. It's very fuzzy and vague, and every time I press somebody on it, they don't really know. And I think that's kind of by design, because of where it's all, I think, going to culminate. I think they're going to get their Jewish Messiah, quote unquote, but it's not going to be the real Messiah. It's going to be something else, someone else, something else, all the above. So yeah, on the one hand, it's like I'm not like unsettled and by the thought of, like, oh my gosh, are they really gonna freaking keep provoking Iran until we have another huge freaking war, and it could turn into World War III and all this kind of stuff, and because that's very possible. I think it's inevitable, like I said, but that's not unsettling to me. It's just kind of more like a given at this point. It's just a matter of when. It could be like tomorrow, and it could be a year from now or 10 years from now. They've been chomping at the bit to invade Iran. Yeah, this one has been in the works for quite a long time, as most of you guys already know. But yeah, it was weird when you're like, yeah, you almost kind of want it to just fade into the background and get forgotten. And of course, that's not what's going to happen. That's not how it works. Satan plays the long game. He's been playing the long game for all of human history. And Persia's been around since pretty much the beginning of human civilization, just about. Like, okay, you're going to keep sending your sons on quote-unquote peacekeeping missions around the world again and again, no matter how asinine the political explanations and rhetoric are for all of it, because you don't want to believe that, like, the whole thing is just a big lie. this amazing idea of the American dream and this democratic empire, democratic imperialism, is going to be a heap of ruins one day. And in some ways, that's kind of how you have to see the world when you look at it through the lens of the kingdom of heaven. Not that you want to see it all destroyed in some sort of apocalyptic way, but guess what? The Bible says it's all going to be made anew, that the elements will melt in the heat, that it will all be redone, wiped away. All these monuments, all these cities and towers and freeways and airports and internet and all our technology and all of it, no matter however much you believe in, the Bible says it's all going to be gone. And it's weird the more you look into eschatology, specifically when you're questioning dispensationalist Zionism and this stuff, where you realize that there really is this underlying vague but very present kind of notion of dominionism. But it's more of like an unconscious dominionism. Like, because at some point Jesus is going to come back and make it all better, and we're going to be raptured and blah blah blah, and he's going to sort out all the stuff with Israel, and they'll get their land back, and Jesus is going to rule. But it's like there's still this idea that God's going to advance his purposes on the world through governments and he does. But this whole idea that that the world as a whole is going to just fall further and further away from God and actually worship Satan in a more and more concerted, collaborative, singular way. This Antichrist mystery beast religion and economy it's going to happen. It's going to look very, very dark before Jesus comes. Darker than it does now, where it really will become more about being persecuted, and not in ways that I think we tend to think of persecution in the conventional, whether it's like jail or beatings or things like that. But I'm sure that is part of it too, but there's so many different ways that you can endure persecution, especially in any AI-driven technocratic society, obviously, which we're rapidly trying to become because it's going to be so awesome and convenient and revolutionary. So I don't know how much sense this makes. It's kind of just me rambling about it, but it is 2:30 in the morning, and I've been thinking about this a lot the last week or so. So yeah, I'll leave links to this stuff because it's worth watching. I think it's worth watching. It's kind of one of those things where there's you can glean the parts that are coming from the actual testimonials, which are, they change the voices and everything. I'm not going to play clips of it because they'd probably jump all over me. It's always the Christian ministries that are the most uptight about if you use 5-second clip, they come after you. So, and because I'm not saying it's I'm not trying to pick on the documentary, but it's just to me, it's just a reflection of this whole oblivious, naive Christian perspective, Western Christian perspective, specifically Americans. And I don't feel bad at all about singling out American Christianity as being uniquely blind and guilty of compromising itself in so many ways, whether it's politically or culturally and all that, or just the idolatry of scientism. And all these things, of course, they're all related, and they all matter, they all tie in together. But yeah, the documentary, it's not terrible, but it definitely shows you that, they can't conceive that, Tehran, there's powers and principalities that are guiding a capital like Tehran, and there's powers and principalities in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and New York and DC and LA and Moscow and Beijing, and and of course on some level everyone would be like, yeah, we know that, but it's like this abstract thing, and it's no, it's not abstract. When you get down to saying there really are straight up Satanists in your government, in your education system, in your military and police and Wall Street and Hollywood and all the rest, real ones, real Satanists. Yeah, there really is a satanic conspiracy. It's not just in those quote unquote Islamic terrorist organizations, which ironically are almost all of them created and controlled by the very people that they supposedly are trying to destroy. So, in some ways, when you look at the spiritual fortitude and seriousness of the people that are having to meet in the ways and live by faith in the ways that they are in a place like Iran, it makes me go, yeah, that's pretty much what it's going to take for, I think, people in the other parts of the world where they've never had to deal with that and can never think that God would allow them to go through it. That's actually what I think it's going to take to get most people to understand the kingdom and how the body of Christ, how the true Israel, the true descendants of Abraham, are called to live in fellowship and serve each other and be faithful side by side with each other, even unto death, When you evaluate the relationships you have with other believers, it's very sobering when you think about, like, would this be somebody who I could, really trust to not renounce Christ even in the face of extreme hardship or loss or death itself? And that kind of puts everything into a very different light. Because I have lots of people, from my family and my past who I love dearly, but if suddenly we do find ourselves in any level of that kind of persecution and having to be underground, so to speak, like in Iran. But that's the whole challenge. Like, are you ready? Are you ready to live as though the kingdom of heaven is your only permanent residency? Whatever citizenship you have here, whatever's on your passport, that's really just like it's a visa, it's a work visa, because it's all temporal and passing and will eventually be gone and over, and all these things that fleshly men and women want to fight over. That's how these wars happen. That's how Satan is able to do all that he has and build and play things off each other in this Hegelian way, generation after generation, and pitting humans against each other and spinning the narrative again and flipping it back around, and deception upon deception and lie upon lie and fleshly reaction upon fleshly reaction. Well, that's how it's always been. And when you come to Jesus, you step out of that whole cycle, step out of that whole paradigm. And now you have to look at everything differently. History and politics and everything. And that's why I think, primarily why any conception of Zionism is just falls short. Of course, not everyone has the exact same perception of it, but I think they're all quite fatally flawed in very basic ways when you just bring it to the core of the gospel. So, yeah, I could go on and on, but that's pretty much what I wanted to share, and I hope it was encouraging in some way. I don't know. I'm just kind of having share time, and there you go. So I hope you're all doing well. Feel free to just. It's kind of something that I really wish I could just sit down with so many of you guys, and would just have the most awesome underground church, meeting, just sharing and talking about so many of these things, because I know so many of you get it just in amazing ways, and I know that, pretty much everybody who I come into contact through this channel, it's always kind of the same thing. We're all in the same kind of, situation of dealing with friends and family and neighbors and people who just, you just want so badly for them to get it, even if it's just like a little piece. And you're trying to figure out, what is that piece? So, like, where do you begin? Where do they need to begin? Because there's so much, and it's over. It was overwhelming for many years, just kind of absorbing all this stuff and learning about it, and the rabbit hole just keeps going deeper and deeper, and then bringing you back to the Word, and then at this point where it's like, okay, it's not quite so overwhelming on a personal level in terms of like, oh my gosh, they want to invade Iran and take over the whole world, and starting with the Middle East, and the Middle East is a big part of that agenda, and it has been for a long time. That's just kind of like, yeah, you get it. It's been It's nothing shocking anymore. But it's overwhelming to try and then turn and like break it down to, people who still, the biggest challenge is just getting them to even try and devote 5 minutes to talking about this stuff. Like, honestly, that's the hardest part, and then you get an opportunity and you're like, where do you begin? Because I've got about 5 minutes before they're going to be like off to their next thing. So anyways, it's kind of a ramble, but I think it's one that it kind of ties into what I think so many of us are just in the midst of day to day. Yeah. It's like the goal is not to just like convince everyone that everything is going to shit and it's all bad and horrible and Satan wins, and because that's really the perception that they have. That's really kind of what they're geared to hear, or they want to hear, or they want to write. Pretty much everything I talk about here, write it all off as just crazy tinfoil hat negativity, I suppose, when in reality it's like, no, the Bible is our hope and the gospel is our hope. But you can't say that and then try and remove it from the context of the reality that we live in today, politically and everything. So, all right, I'm going to wrap this up right now because I've just keep rambling on, but that's okay. It's been a while since I've done that. So thanks for listening if you got this far. Thanks for all your support and your emails and just all the awesome folks I've met. And I just appreciate you guys more than you'll ever know. All right. Thanks so much. God bless.
There is a door, and it's made of wood, and it can open and shut like a good door should. Right now it's closed, and the latch is tied, so no one can pass to the other side. Now when a stranger knocks and the man inside can let him in or run away and hide, because the only way through is by that door. You have a door, the door to your heart, and the choice is yours right from the start. For Jesus said in his holy book, behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if any man hears and opens the door, I will give him life forevermore. But first of all, he's gotta open that door. Now it's plain to see that life is fun, and folk get around, many things are done. But comes a time when the kicks get stale, and the so-called fun begins to look a bit pale. But Christ means so much more, you see.